everyone! Welcome to Interviewsicle, a musical feature where I interview inspiring people and ask them about their work, their ideas, and the stories behind what they do. Today, I'll be speaking with Megan McDonald, the children's author and best known for creating the popular Judy Moody series, which has sold more than 30 million copies worldwide. She has published more than 60 books in over 20 languages, including the Stink series, the Bunny and Clyde series, and the Sisters Club series. Let's get started.
Wake up, tune in, it's time to know what's happening fast, what's moving slow. Stories big and stories small, it's Newsicle, we've got it all. Smart news, cool views, this is Newsicle.
Hi, Miss McDonald. Nice to meet you.
You too. It's so great to be here. I love your podcast.
Thank you. Can you tell us a little about where you grew up? I heard you were one of 5 sisters.
You heard correctly. I am actually the youngest of 5 sisters. I have 4 bossy older sisters. It's great having a bunch of sisters because so many funny stories happen when you're growing up with all these sisters, and those can become Judy Moody ideas in my books. I live in California now, but I grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. It's called the City of Bridges, and my dad was a bridge builder. My mom was a social worker, and everybody in our family loved to read. So with all those sisters, we did a lot of reading.
And you were a children's librarian before you were a writer. How did working in a library influence your stories?
Wow, that had so much to do with me becoming a writer. From the time I was 14, I worked as a shelver in a public library. And when I grew up, we didn't have a branch of a library near our house, so we just had the bookmobile come to the shopping center. And in the summer, my sisters and I would all pile on the bookmobile and get an armload of books. We decided we were going to try to read all the books on the bookmobile one summer, but I didn't know till I grew up and became a librarian that guess what? The bookmobile goes back to the library at night and they put more books on the bookmobile. We were never going to read all the books, but because of my love of books, I became a librarian. And when I was working as a children's librarian, I was reading aloud and telling stories at story time. And somebody gave me these puppets of a hermit crab and a fish that were these beautiful, colorful puppets. And I couldn't find a book about a hermit crab, so I made up a story that I did at story time with the kids. And I got them to say there's a refrain that goes scritch, scratch, where the hermit crab walks along the beach looking for a new home. I got the kids to do that with me. That story that I told as a librarian became my first book that I ever got published called Is This a House for Hermit Crab? So it was very influential to be a librarian first before I became a writer.
I also read that one of your stories was written when you were about 10 years old, from the perspective of a pencil sharpener. Do you still have a copy of that?
I do have a copy of that. So I love to write from the time I was probably about 10 years old. And back then, we had a school newspaper that was actually printed on paper. And so my teacher, when I was in 5th grade, he knew I loved to write. And he said, I'll leave a little corner of the newspaper open for you every month, and you can write a poem or a story. So I had this little corner that I always got to write, and my mom saved a bunch of those newspapers, and the first one was about the pencil sharpener. I don't know why I decided to write about that.
That's so fun. A lot of our listeners also want to start writing and have ideas for stories. What is your advice on how to get started?
The best thing anybody can do if you want to write is to read. Because just by reading, you're going to absorb a lot and it'll inspire you and give you ideas. But also, without even realizing, you learn a lot about language, vocabulary, how a story is made, beginning, middle, end. I think the first thing is just to read all kinds of books really widely. Also, I think if you want to write, I always carry a little notebook with me wherever I go so that I have something to scribble down in. And you have to invite ideas. So you go out and you look at the world around you and you can look at it through the lens of storytelling. Maybe you see a three-legged dog or a kite stuck in a tree, but suddenly that could become an idea for a story.
I love the characters in Judy Moody. How did you come up with her?
Thank you. Well, Judy Moody is kind of me because I'm kind of a moody person myself. And we have a lot of the similar qualities, like we both have messy hair. I like to collect stuff like Judy does. So some of it was based on things that I remember from when I was 8. But also, I started to notice when I would go and speak to kids at schools and libraries and bookstores that around 3rd grade, kids would always ask me, "Can you write if you're in a bad mood?"
Yeah.
I started to think, oh, kids this age are becoming aware of being in a mood. And so it was really the idea of the moods that brought about Judy Moody. And one of the first things I do is try to get the character's name. And I had the idea, since Moody is a real last name, I thought, well, that would be kind
Yeah.
of fun since she has all these moods to have her name be Moody. And then I brainstormed a whole list of first names, and when I hit on Judy, I was like, "Hey, it rhymes. That sounds really fun." So from both the idea of moods and her name was kind of how she came about.
Your latest Judy Moody book, Judy Moody's Sunny Side Up, is number 17 in that series. It is about how Judy starts a kids' newspaper, which I love because I'm really interested in the news. And I know our listeners are too. In the book, Judy's teacher, Mr. Todd, says there is a lot of bad news in the world, but bad news can inspire us to do something about it. Bad news can be a call to action. Can you tell us more about this?
Sure. During COVID, when everybody had to stay home, I heard this news story about a girl who started her own newspaper for kids. And gosh, I wish I had thought that Judy Moody should have her own podcast now, like you. That would have been so cool. But like you're saying, there really wasn't a lot of news that was geared so kids could understand some of the complicated things going on in the world. And of course, during COVID, there was so much bad news. So I thought, oh, it would be really fun to have a good news newspaper where all the stories are about good news. So when I was listening to your podcast, I heard a story about Jimothy the raccoon, and I thought, oh, that would have been a great good news story for Judy Moody. It started with the idea of coming up with good news, but sometimes if you hear bad news, it helps you to think, well, I don't agree with that or I don't like that. So maybe I'm going to write a letter about it, or maybe I'm going to go to a protest about it. It kind of is a call to action to do something about it.
Switching to another series, Bunny and Clyde is a series for kids who are just starting to read chapter books on their own. What do you hope a 6 or 7-year-old feels when they finish a Bunny and Clyde adventure? And why did you want to write about a bunny and a chipmunk who keep accidentally doing the right thing?
Okay, so Bunny and Clyde, I think the first Bunny and Clyde is my funniest book I've ever written. So if you like funny books like Judy Moody, you'll like Bunny and Clyde. And of course, they're not human characters. Remember how I was talking about getting the names first? And I had the names Bunny and Clyde, which is a little bit of a takeoff of some bank robbers from a long time ago that were called Bonnie and Clyde. So once I had Bunny and Clyde, I knew Bunny was going to be a rabbit, but I didn't know what to make Clyde. And I just love chipmunks. And I live in the West where, guess what? We don't have chipmunks here. But I grew up in Pennsylvania with chipmunks. So I thought, oh, I'm going to make him be a chipmunk. So I had my animal characters. Bunny and Clyde are always good. They always obey the rules and do everything right. And they always compost their apple cores and clean their room and turn their library books in on time. And I thought it would be really fun if you turn that upside down and all of a sudden they've been good and they decide they want to be bad. But of course, they don't know how to be bad. So they go to the library and they say, "Do you have any bad books?" And the librarian says, "Well, I like to think we just have good books here." So I hope readers will mostly just enjoy the ride with Bunny and Clyde and have a lot of fun and try to guess whether they're going to be good or they're going to be bad and what will happen at the end.
One more series I have to talk about. The Fairy Door Diaries is a series for kids around 5 to 8 who love magic. It's about the idea that there are fairies hiding in the house. Where did the idea of a secret magical world come from?
Well, the Fairy Door Diaries is so different for me because it's fantasy and it's magic, which I love. And I got the idea because I was visiting my family in Minnesota, and Minnesota has a million lakes. And I was taking a walk around one of the lakes there. And at the very bottom of this big tree, I saw a fairy door. And I got fascinated with thinking, do fairies live here? Are they in this tree? And there were all these little items leading up to the door. And then the coolest part was you could write a note and leave it for the fairies at the door, and the fairies would write back to you. So that got me thinking all about magic and the idea of a fairy door that could lead to a magical world. So in my series, Eliza of the Elves is the main character, and she really believes in magic. She makes a tiny little fairy door that she puts in this little space under the stairs that's off of her room. And when the door opens, every time there's an adventure, she gets whooshed through the door like with fairy dust, and she goes into a different magical world each time. So there's a different kind of fairy, like hobgoblins or pixies or frost fairies, flower fairies. Each one will have a different kind of fairy. And right now I'm working on book 5 in that series.
Oh, wow. Last question on your books. I know you have a new Fairy Door Diaries coming out in a few weeks, Eliza and the Fairy Double. Can you tell us a little bit about what to expect in this new book?
I would love to, because this is my favorite book of all the Fairy Door Diaries. And when I write these, I do a lot of research about fairies and different kinds of fairies. And I found this one little line in one of the books about fairies that said, every human has an identical counterpart in the fairy world that looks just like them. So I became fascinated with the idea of a fairy double, that we would all have in the fairy magical realm, we would have a fairy that looks just like us, that's like a twin. So I decided to give Eliza a fairy double, and then somebody who's like the evil force impersonates and looks just like her fairy double, and Eliza has to solve the riddle of which one is her real fairy double and which one is the evil.
That's a good theme for a book.
Yeah, I hope everybody will read it. It's going to be really fun.
Now it's time for our lightning round. Are you ready?
Is this like Final Jeopardy? It's much harder.
It's easier.
Here we go.
What is your favorite word?
My favorite word. Well, I have 2, shenanigans and hooligans. And I use those a lot in my books.
If you could be any character in a book for a day, who would it be?
Harriet the Spy. Growing up, that was my favorite book. And I love that Harriet was a reporter and that she would like spy on people and write everything in her little notebook. So I think I would like to be like Harriet the Spy. And it would give me a lot of writing ideas.
What is your favorite children's book written by someone who isn't you?
Right now, my favorite book is kind of a new series called Lone Wolf. And Lone Wolf is somebody who wants to be left alone a lot. When he goes to the library, the kids at story time are making too much noise, and it really annoys him because he likes to read. They're very funny. And Lone Wolf is just a great character that I wish I thought of and wrote about myself.
What were you most curious about when you were a kid?
As a kid, I was probably most curious about science and the natural world because we lived at the end of a long street and we had all this woods around us. And in the summers, all day, we could just go outside and we would float boats down the creek and catch salamanders, and we had turtles and things like that. So, probably most curious about creatures and animals in the natural world.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Miss McDonald.
Lily, thanks so much for having me. You should be on TV as a news anchor because you're so good.
Thank you so much. And to our listeners, make sure to pick up some of our amazing books. I hope this interview sparked your curiosity to ask a few more questions, read more books, and maybe even begin writing a story of your own. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time on Interviewsicle.